to see this one in action. So what's going to happen here is, in the past, I've usually been streaming games being played by other people with my commentary. And in some cases, I've actually been streaming clips of my own gameplay. But usually when I've been streaming my own gameplay, it's been a situation where it's had the player audio, so you've been able to hear me discussing the game with my opponent. So for instance, I know in the first season of Invader League for Star Wars Legion, I streamed that game with player commentary, with player audio rather than a commentary track. So, you were able to see that game as it transpired in the finals there, and you could hear what I was saying, you could hear what my opponent was saying. It was all very cool, but it didn't have the same level of kind of analysis and so on that I like to provide when I am commentating games. So I've been trying something recently where I've been taking some recordings of certain games that I've been playing, and I'm now going to be streaming those recordings. We're going to do it kind of similarly to how we do a normal game here. So I'm going to be streaming the recording with commentary, but it's going to be, instead of having the third person observer's perspective, it's going to be me streaming the game from my perspective. And I'm going to be talking about what I'm thinking, potential mistakes, things that I could have done differently, what's going on in the matchup. So just to set the stage here, this game that I'm about to show you guys was recorded by me from Tabletop Simulator, as you can probably tell. And this was myself versus Matt G during the Legion Ladder semifinals. And so I believe this game was played about a week ago. And this was the semifinal. I actually recorded my game in my first game, the quarterfinal or round of 8 game. I did actually record that as well. But unfortunately, something went wrong with that recording and it cut off after a brief period of time. So I did not get the entire game recorded that time, which is actually pretty unfortunate. Because it was a less common matchup. It was Warrior versus Wizard. But just to set the stage, that game was not incredibly close. My quick summary of it would be that as Warrior, I was able to kind of take the initiative early, be very aggressive, and ultimately get my opponent into a pretty unfavorable spot. I think that the Warrior versus Wizard matchup is kind of interesting. A lot of people have said that's a very favored matchup for Wizard. I think in Blitz, I'm a lot more scared of a Wizard, but in Classic Constructed, I've actually had relatively good results against them. Now, to be fair, Wizard's a very hard class to play. I'm not sure I would be able to say the same thing against a seasoned veteran New Zealand player with many tournaments under his belt as Wizard playing Constructed. But even down in New Zealand, I don't believe Wizard is getting great results in Constructed events. So it's an interesting situation, but I don't find it to be that hard a matchup. And in this case, I was able to kind of execute my main game plan. I believe I put Irina's Prayer in my arsenal relatively early to get some protection going. Had my 2 Null Rune items for the just classic pitch protection, and then I was able to just kind of go very aggressive and overwhelm my opponent. But that's not the game that we're going to commentate here. The one that we are going to commentate is me versus Matt G. Dorinthea versus Katsu. So this is an interesting matchup. Now, this is one where I think that Warrior, depending on the build they're using, Warrior might be favored or might be disfavored. So I tend to think that Warrior has the advantage going into a game against an aggro ninja, because Warrior can just sort of race, and in general you usually can't afford to race against Warrior because the Dawnblade counters are going to be too effective. But against a more controlling ninja, that can be a much more difficult battle for a Warrior, with all the defense reactions and stuff potentially going for fatigue and extending the game. That can be a lot more challenging for Warrior to deal with. So just a little interesting thought there about the different matchups that you might encounter Warrior versus Ninja. And we'll see which one this one is as the game goes on. So without further ado, I am going to start up the recording here. Let's see what we're doing. Okay, so we're starting off, and so we're just flipping our cards here, and so we're both playing very standard items for this matchup. I'm going first, which is undesirable. You want to go second if it's aggro versus aggro, or potentially aggro versus aggro, and the reason for that is that the person who is going second can essentially block with as much stuff as they want, and then redraw, so you don't really damage their tempo. You might get some health damage through if you have some tricks, you have some attack reactions, something like that, but you're not really going to damage their tempo, which is often more important than health. So on my turn, all I actually do is I'm going to just Arsenal pass, and that's going to be a little, that might be unorthodox for some players, but just the Arsenal pass play there is, I think, able to be pretty effective. So then my opponent, Matt G, we see him, he's putting his counter on Tunic. He's running relatively standard items. The only exception is he is playing the Snapdragon Scalers, so I think the Snapdragon Scalers are very good. They're certainly more aggressive than the Breeze Rider Boots because you can use them even if your opponent fully blocks the attack. But the Breeze Rider Boots do have that extra point of armor, and for that reason I've often seen people playing them against me as Warrior. Just get that extra little piece of protection and try to make it harder for me to score my on-hit effects, which can be very important to aggressive Warrior gameplay. So Matt G, thinking about his turn, and he's playing Katsu. Of course, he's using the 2 Harmonized Karachi. I have seen some people using the Zephyr Needle, but typically that's something that you're only going to use if you're playing Ira or Benji and can get a buff on it that's going to make it so it isn't broken by a normal attack, and even then it can be broken by a defense reaction, which makes it very risky. So it's a tough thing to put in. No. Matt says in chat, sorry, weird hand. This is actually one of the benefits of the approach that I did, where I decided not to attack and I just put a card in Arsenal and ended my turn. If I had attacked him, he could have said, okay, this isn't a very good hand. I'm going to block with some of these cards that are redundant and hope to draw into cards that will let me play a stronger hand. But because I didn't attack him, he didn't have that opportunity to kind of do a sort of de facto mulligan by blocking with some of his cards. So we see a pitch here. Pitching a head jab and swinging. Unfortunately, as I'm streaming this, I don't really have the ability to zoom in on specific cards and so on as I would normally, so it's going to be a little lower fidelity. I did highlight the head jab there. It is a red head jab. He then has to pitch another card for his second attack. Didn't have a blue 0 cost to pitch. Pitches him against your release, and that's going to come in. So I let the first head jab in. So that's going to just hit me for 1 damage here. And I'm actually, I'm thinking about blocking, and I do actually block here. And I believe the reason for that is that I have a very redundant hand. I'm not going to play 2 copies of Warrior's Valor in the same turn. So I decided to block with one of those cards to block his second hit. And then he goes in with a Soulbead Strike for 4. But because his mask is disabled, I know that this isn't threatening a card draw. So even if it hits, it doesn't really matter. Or no, I'm sorry, it is threatening a card draw because he hit me with the Razor Reflex, so I do block for 4. I block with the Twinning Blade and then the Refraction Bolters because he used that Razor on the Karachi. So I have to say I think this is a pretty good turn because now I can just E-Strike 7. And I managed to get him, or I can E-Strike 5 go again in this case, which is apparently what I do. I don't know what my Arsenal card is. Oh, you know what? I think my Arsenal card is Snatch or something, and I'm doing this because I have a good Arsenal play after this. Now, this is a little bit telegraphed because if you do, and you'll notice that I, not remembering this game, immediately thought that it was 7. The fact that it's 5 go again and that I don't have any energy for a Dawnblade swing means that the next thing is something that costs 0. So let's think about what I could have that costs 0. Like let's pretend we're Matt. So it's like, okay, 5 damage is coming in, and then he's going to do something else. What else could he do? So one thing is it could be a total bluff, and I'm not doing anything else and just hoping to make him block weird or something. That's possible, but unlikely. The more likely thing is that I have something that costs 0 that I can play on its own. So in this deck, that would be either an Energy Potion or it would be a copy of Snatch. And in this case, it is a copy of Snatch. So Snatch is, this is a red Snatch, so it's coming in at strength 4. And if it hits, I draw a card. And so then he does not block, I pass attack reaction, and he counters it with a Sink Below for 4. And so no reactions there from me, so he does prevent me from drawing a card. Snatch is a good card to put in Arsenal because you can, when you play it from Arsenal, you know that Arsenal is going to be open to potentially put the card in that you just drew. And that he's now going to go for his own E-Strike. And I believe that he just goes for 7. Yeah, E-Strike 7, and so I'm not going to block that. Or am I? So I say no block, yep, and I just take it. And this is, E-Strike. In this case, I have a very aggressive hand, so what I can do is I can pitch the Blue Warrior's Valor, play Spoils of War, and then come in with the Dawnblade. It has go again, so then depending on what happens here, I can potentially try to get in with the Dawnblade using that Singing Steel Blade to buff. And I have the 2 copper on hit, which can potentially help me if I draw a lot of blue. And if he blocks me heavily and stops me here, I can then follow up with the E-Strike. So because Spoils of War grants an unconditional go again, it can be a lot more flexible than Warrior's Valor, Warrior's Valor gives you go again only if your attack hits, so you're kind of committed to trying to get that attack in, whether with a lot of damage or with buffs from your attack reactions or whatever it is. But this Spoils of War gives me the go again either way. So even if he like blocks heavily and stops this attack, I can follow up with the E-Strike. And alternatively, I can choose to try to get in with the Singing Steel Blade and then put the E-Strike in Arsenal. So let's see what I choose to do here. I really have a lot of options with this particular hand. And one note here is that I forgot to take my Tunic this turn. And amusingly, my opponent has also forgotten, I think he's also forgotten at least one Tunic use. My opponent does not block, so I opt to take the 2 copper there, and then I'm going to swing again for 3. And in some cases, you would want to pitch a card from hand and then use the Brave Forge Bracers for +1. In this case, I don't do it because this way I can pitch my E-Strike and then still play that Singing Steel Blade. However, I've kind of worsened my position unnecessarily. If I had not forgotten to take Tunic, because this is my 3rd turn, so if I had not forgotten to take the Tunic, then I would have that 1 energy without potentially having to pitch, and I could, either use that for the Singing Steel Blade, or I could potentially actually use that Tunic to pay for my Brave Forge Bracers and then come in for 4, and then still have the threat of the potential attack reaction. 4 is an important number in this game because normal cards only block for 3. So coming in for 4 instead of 3 is going to be a little difficult to stop. Also, chat, feel free to ask me any questions. I can potentially pause this video if you have any things that you want me to look into. I can also highlight stuff if you want. So interestingly, my opponent does not block here. And that means that I get in for the 3 damage, and that does give me the +1 counter, and then I put the E-Strike into Arsenal. And the reason that I choose the E-Strike in Arsenal is because the Singing Steel Blade is pitching for more, so it's better to have in hand to potentially fuel stuff. And secondarily, it has Reprise, which means it's conditional. My opponent comes in with a Kadachi here, so I'm not going to block. You almost never block the first Kadachi. I think it's almost... I won't say it is always, but I think it is almost always bad to block the first Kadachi. So the second Kadachi coming in here, coming in for 1. And this one is kind of interesting. Sometimes you do want to block the second Kadachi, and the reason that I say that is because blocking the second Kadachi turns off Mask of Momentum. So in this case, I go for an equipment block. Equipment blocks are a great tactic against Kadachi because if you take an equipment block, then you still have cards in hand for your own initiative in the future, and you still have and you've still broken up their potential free draw. So this was a turn where my opponent let in something that was like a powerful attack, not necessarily something that you want to do. The conventional wisdom against Warrior is you really want to prevent them from getting that +1 counter. But in this case, Matt decided to let me get that +1 counter. He didn't defend even though he could have, which means that I'm wary about a potential strong attack here. So by blocking the second Kadachi with my Arcanite Skullcap instead of a card from hand, I am kind of retaining momentum in the sense that I still have a bunch of cards from hand that I can use to potentially defend and to attack. And in this case, we're going to see him follow up by pitching an Ancestral Empowerment to go with the blue card he had already pitched. That puts him up to 2 total energy after already having spent 2 on Kadachi. And then he is coming in with a Command and Conquer for 6. So if this hits, it is going to destroy the card that I have in Arsenal. We know from the previous turn that the card that I have in Arsenal is an Enlightened Strike, a very valuable card. So I do not necessarily want to let him destroy that. On the other hand, I might want to let him destroy it so that I can be more aggressive on my own turn. I do have a relatively aggressive hand. I have the hit and run for go again. And then I could, I have the Twinning Blade that I can use to do multiple attacks for strength 4. I have a Snatch in hand that I could use as a follow-up. Potentially I have the Singing Steel Blade. And so I end up actually deciding no block here. I want to keep the very aggressive hand that I have, and this does mean that I take a big hit and lose an E-Strike. But I would have had to discard 2 of the cards from hand to do this. Now, it is possible that I could have discarded 2 cards from hand and then done like Dawnblade, Dawnblade with Go Again. Or I'm sorry, I could do like E-Strike, Go Again into Dawnblade or whatever. There's definitely some options, especially because I do have the Tunic now. I didn't forget this time. But ultimately, I decided that I wanted to be more aggressive with these cards, and I think what I do here is I go for the double swing with Twinning Blade. I don't quite remember, but I think that's the play that I'm going to do here. Is that true? I guess that's not true. I go for the Dawnblade for 4. Um, I was thinking I was going to pitch Singing Steel Blade, play Hit and Run, and then swing, and then Twinning Blade, and then swing again. But that is not what I'm doing. I might go for the Singing Steel Blade into Glint or something if he blocks for exactly 4, but we'll have to see just what happens here. It's kind of funny because I really don't remember the specific lines of play, and like just in discussing this, it's interesting that there's a bunch of different stuff that I can potentially try. So one of the advantages to going in with the Dawnblade like this is that I do have, so then he he triple blocks. So he actually blocks 7 here against my 4, so a single +3 from an attack reaction won't get in. But I believe what I respond with is Singing Steel Blade into Glint into Twinning Blade, which then is going to allow me to... that is going to allow me to go again. It's also going to let me draw a card because Reprise is active, and then the Twinning Blade is going to let me swing my weapon again, and that means that I will have another opportunity to potentially hit for 4. As you can see, I immediately search Glyn. When searching my deck, I start typing it in, find the Glint the Quicksilver, and play it. And then I shuffle up, and I get a free card. The free card is an Iron Song response, and then I play the Twinning Blade as well. So this is going to put me into a spot where I can potentially come in for 4. My opponent says no reactions. I'm like, okay. So in this situation, he just spent a lot of defense, but because of the Twinning Blade, I'm allowed to make another attack. Twinning Blade is kind of the same thing as Dorinthea's reaction, but it doesn't require you to have hit to do it. And then I spend the energy that I have floating from pitching that I believe... I think it was a blue Hit and Run, and then I pitched it, and then played the Singing Steel Blade for 1, and then I swing again for my last resource. But I do have some resources available. I have I do have that Tunic, and I do have some other options. So now Matt is once again going to have to defend 4 if he wants to stop my sword from getting in there. Doesn't do it, so I get in there for 4. And so at this time I have to think, do I want to break my Brave Forge Bracers? I could break Bracers and then come in with the Dawnblade again for 4. And if I do that, then it will potentially threaten a second counter, and that is what I choose to do. So I'm going to break the Bracers, and then I'm going to pitch the Iron Song response that I had there. I use one of the energy for a bracer for using the Bracers. I'm sorry, I broke the Bolters. And then I use the Bracers for a +1 because my last one hit. Then I come in for 5. And if he doesn't stop this attack coming in for 5, it is going to land and get me a second Dawnblade counter, which is really dangerous. All of a sudden, my basic attack is coming in for 5. So this is a high priority defense. And if he doesn't defend this, it indicates that he's going to do... he's saving stuff for something relatively crazy, or it indicates that he has a bad defensive hand, which is possible for Ninja. Unfortunately for Ninja, they have a lot of cards that block for 2, which is really not necessarily what you want against a warrior, so it's going to be interesting to see what he does here. So one thing you might notice in this game is that I'm playing very aggressively. I've used my bolters relatively early. I've been using some armor relatively early to avoid using cards. One of the things, so often it can be good to use armor late, but you can also, if armor is going to get you a good opportunity early on, it can be really valuable to use it. So Matt opts not to block, and I pass attack reactions, and he's going to take 5. That does actually get me a second Dawnblade counter, which is pretty scary. And I put the Snatch in Arsenal. That's a very strong thing to have there because you can potentially play Snatch on a later turn, and it will always have an empty arsenal that you can potentially use the card that you would draw on hit for. If you play Snatch while you already have a card in Arsenal, often the card draw does nothing unless you have some means of giving it go again, like Snapdragon Scalers or a Razor Reflex. Matt pitches blue, comes in with a Kadachi. I don't block. He has a second Kadachi swing coming in. Again, I don't block. I'm basically saying, show me what you got here. Soulbead Strike red coming in for 4. So in this situation, I can block with cards from hand. I can also block with cards that I have. From other areas. I don't block this one. He plays the Ancestral Empowerment. So I have a quite aggressive hand, and I have 2 counters on Dawnblade, and I'm just thinking, okay, hit me. Whatever you're doing is not going to be as good as what I'm doing. And I'm going to come in next turn for a really, really aggressive attack. So, I'm looking at what I have, and I'm saying, okay, so I could pitch blue, play war, and I could pitch blue. I could play Spoils of War. Then I can play. I can potentially then pitch and play an overpower for +4. I already have 2 counters. I'm in a very aggressive spot. He comes in with a Magenshi release for 4, but his combo isn't enabled. So once again, I don't block and I'm just taking damage. So you might say, wow, you're getting really low against Ninja. Getting low against Ninja is very dangerous with those Kadachi, and it is dangerous. But my reasoning is that I have such an aggressive situation of my own that I want to keep the cards that I have and force a very threatening situation for him where he's going to be forced to defend and lose a bunch of tempo. One of the best ways in this game to gain tempo is by just blocking a bunch of stuff with your face and taking damage, and that's what I chose to do on that turn. So I let him have a card draw and a go again that I could have defended against, but in exchange, I still have my full hand, and I'm now in a crazy position with this attack, so I play Spoils of War and then swing. So the Spoils of War is +2 and unconditional go again and 2 copper on hit. And so then my weapon attack has the +2 from those counters. So I'm actually coming in with the Dawnblade for 7, and it has go again even if it misses. And so my opponent is going to block, so he blocks 8 here. So then I'm going to go for the overpower that I was saving. So I pitch, go up to 4 energy, and then in order to play an overpower, and that the overpower gives me +4, so I have 11 total to his 8. And then he does have a defense reaction, so he may have let me do that damage earlier because he was like, okay, I'm going to get some defense set up and stop him next turn. But then because it's the unconditional go again, I can then attack with that snatch, and that's coming in for 4. He only has 1 card, so he needs to have another defense reaction that costs 0 in his hand, or he can't stop this, and it's going to hit him for 4 and get me a card. And additionally, he's used a ton of stuff on defense. So, even though my big attack didn't get in, even with that attack reaction, I'm actually thinking this is a pretty cool hand. This has been a pretty cool turn. The attack does get in with Snatch. I draw a card. It's a Glint. And so I put Glint in Arsenal. Often you don't want to put blue cards in Arsenal, but Glint is actually a very good one to have there. And the reason you don't want to put blue cards in Arsenal some of the time is that you can't pitch from Arsenal. So then I'm just doing my pitch there, and I put my cards in discard. He only has 1 card, and he just throws that card into Arsenal. So then I'm looking at my hand here. I have another Glint. I have a Warrior's Valor. I have a Iron Song Determination. So there's a lot of ways that I could do this hand. So I'm going to go for I think what happens here is that I end up going for the Iron Song Determination, which is relatively early for this. So Iron Song Determination gives your weapon +1 attack and dominate. Often you want to play that at the end once you think your opponent's attack reactions are depleted, but this time I go for an earlier play. So blue Warrior's Valor plus Iron Song Determination and then swing. So this is coming in for 5 with Dominate, go again on hit. And this is actually a kind of interesting one too, because in this situation I had a lot of blue. I could have actually pitched, the Glint that I had in hand and the blue Warrior's Valor and used one of my copper tokens to draw a card. In this case, I thought that this was a pretty good aggressive play, but in some situations I might have thought, it's a better option here to go for the copper token. Like if I thought my opponent very likely had a defense reaction in Arsenal, I might have thought, this is a good situation to not go for the Iron Song Determination play. So we're going to maybe even pitch that as part of the plan to get the copper going and go for something else. But in this case, I decided to try it. So Blue Warrior's Valor plus Iron Song Determination, each giving +1. So coming in with the Dawnblade at a total of strength 5. And it does have Dominate. My opponent doesn't block, so I pass attack reactions. And it does get in there, so I'm going to deal a nice 5 damage to him. And then I have a Glint in Arsenal. So then I'm going to pitch and swing again. So this is coming in. And if my opponent blocks from hand, I can actually play the Glint that I have in Arsenal, draw a card, and then play that Command and Conquer that I have, which because even if I draw a red, I can use my Tunic for the second energy. My opponent doesn't block, though, so he ends up taking 4 damage. I get a counter on Dawnblade, and that's going to be the turn. So here we see Matt G using basically the same tactic that I used on the previous turn, where he's opting to take a bunch of damage and in this case also give me a Dawnblade counter in exchange for gaining some tempo of his own by still having a full 4-card hand this time. And so that's actually a pretty powerful move in the right circumstances, and I'm definitely worrying a little bit when I see this. So then he's going to come in here with a yellow Surging Strike for 4 with Go Again. This is the combo starter for the main ninja combo, and I opt not to block it here. It lands and he uses Katsu's ability. So there's always this aspect of like, do you block Surging or no? So the upside to blocking Surging is that if he needed Katsu's ability to fill his combo, he can't get it. The downside is that if he had the combo naturally, then you're in trouble because you can be in a situation where you don't have the resources to block Whelming, which is a very high priority block because it draws on hit, and you might not have the resources to block Megenshi's either. Also, you need to overblock these by 1 in this circumstance because there is the chance that your opponent is going to hit you with, I forget what this card is actually called, but the arm item that he's using, which allows you to give +1 to a card that has combo as an attack reaction. I think it's called Breaking Scales. That could be wrong. But I think it's called Breaking Scales. So this one's coming in for 4, Go Again, draw on hit, and I overblock at 5 using an item and a piece of equipment. And because I'm overblocking 5, even if he uses Breaking Scales, that attack isn't going to land. Squirrelbane in chat says this commentary is very insightful. Thank you. Appreciated, man. I appreciate it. It's definitely something that I find interesting, and I'm hoping to do more videos like this if this one turns out to be fun. I'll have to review the final product and so on, but I got some more recorded games in the tank that I can potentially send out for you guys. So then Matt G going with the big one, the Megenshi release. And so at this time I'm looking through his discard pile. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to count the number of cards he could potentially play with Lord of Wind. In some situations, if your opponent has already discarded a bunch of Lord of Winds, so they can't search for it or whatever, you might be in a situation where it's actually favorable not to block this, but this isn't one of those cases. So I'm like, I'm going to block. I'm going to block, and we'll see what happens. And so I do the double block there. I think that was coming in for 5, so I block for 6 so that he doesn't get me with his... I block for 6 so that he doesn't get me with that Breaking Scales. Then I'm just going to pitch and send out a Dawnblade Strike for 4. And so this Dawnblade Strike for 4, I do have that Glint in Arsenal, and because I have the Glint in Arsenal, if he doesn't block this, I can Glint and then come in with a second Dawnblade hit, which will potentially give me another counter. In some cases, my opponent might think, oh, you know what, this is my opportunity. He just had to defend heavily. He just pitched. He doesn't really have a turn. All he's doing is swinging this, and he's hoping that I'm going to block him with 2 cards or whatever to prevent him from getting a counter, to knock his counter off the Dawnblade. But I'm going to just let him hit me for 4 and then come back huge and try to close out the game. So that's one thing that my opponent could definitely be thinking here. Another thing he could think, so normally you do want to block the Dawnblade to prevent the counter, but he might well be thinking, this is my opportunity to not block it and put myself into a situation where I'm going to be able to do a huge combo with all these cards that I have and hopefully kill him or put him so far into the danger zone that I can close out the game with Kadachi Pokes. 9 life, which is what I'm currently at, is a pretty low point to be at against a ninja. A big combo from a ninja can do definitely more than 9 damage. I mean, if you actually land the full Lord of Wind combo, it can do 15 or more easily, because you get obviously that's a situation where you typically want to prevent Lord of Wind from actually going off. But yeah, so he doesn't block, and then I play the Glint. So I think he was, in fact... Now, the problem with this also is that if he has a defense reaction that he can play now, I'm in big trouble and sort of just wasted my turn. But he does not, I believe, have a defense reaction. He posts a frowny face in chat because I believe what he was thinking was that he would, in fact, let me hit him and then come back huge. But now I hit him and I have Go Again from the Glint, which is crucial. So then I'm going to pay 1 from my... I'm going to pay the 1 that I had floating and to use my Bracer. Then I'm going to use my Tunic to swing. So now I'm coming in for 5 instead of 4. So that's going to be extra threatening. And so this is basically going to be... this is actually threatening lethal. Now, he knows I don't have any cards, so he could just block with his mask only and go to 1 life, but he doesn't want to go to 1 life because I'm Warrior, and that would put him in range to be instantly killed by Steelblade Shunt. And so he could block with his mask and his Tunic, and that would block 3, and then it would only be 2 damage, and he would go to 2 life, and he wouldn't be in instant death range. But also, if this attack hits, I'm going to get a +1 counter, which he really doesn't want to have happen, because if he doesn't kill me with whatever this thing is that he's doing next, he is going to be in huge trouble if I have a strength 5 Dawnblade. You really don't want to let that happen. So he is really thinking about his defense here. I think he ends up blocking with like 1 card plus Tunic, but don't hold me to that, because I definitely did not review the tape prior to watching this game. It would be, yeah, and that's what he does. So he blocks with a CNC. So he's blocking with the CNC, even though CNC is a really good card. I don't have a card in Arsenal, so he doesn't have that Destroy Arsenal type effect. So he blocks with the CNC plus the Mask so that's a total of 5 damage blocked, and that does mean that I'm now in a situation that he's now in a situation where he doesn't have the potential Mask trigger, which actually is good for me because it means I can ignore his second Kadachi poke. But it also means that he's going to keep more cards for aggression. But because I'm not worried about his second Kadachi poke anymore, I can kind of hold more of my defense back before I see what the full thing is that he's going to do. So then looking at my hand, I've actually drawn a somewhat unfortunate hand because I have all reds. But I do have a Scar for a Scar, so if he does hit me with stuff that brings me down below him, I can Scar, pitch, and swing. I could also do something like, I can also potentially play that Flock of the Featherwalkers or that Command and Conquer, depending on what else happens here. So then he goes for an E-Strike. I figured if this is an E-Strike, go again. Yeah, it's an E-Strike, go again for 5. So because this is an E-Strike, go again, I'm thinking, so the next thing that he has is probably going to be some kind of attack. I'm not entirely sure what attack it is, but the actual E-Strike is not necessarily all that dangerous. So in this situation, I'm going to decide, I think I decide not to block this. And this is actually a minor mistake, and I'll tell you why. If I don't block this E-Strike, I'm going to end up, I'm at risk of being instantly killed by Razor. So if he had a Razor here in Arsenal, he could play it and do 8 damage total, and that would be just enough to kill me. But I'm thinking he doesn't have it. Because so for one thing, if he did have a Razor, he would probably have higher stats. But then so he would go like E-Strike 7 and then try to Razor me. But because he went for the E-Strike 5, go again, it probably means that he has something there. So then he goes for a open the center, and he says it's 6, but I think this is an error because it's just 5 since it doesn't have its combo. So this is threatening and lethal, and he could actually give it the +1 here, so I can't block with 1 card. So if I block with 1 card, he just triggers Breaking Scales and kills me. So I actually have to block with 2 cards, which I do. So I'm gonna block with Flock, and then I'm also going to block with that Steelblade Supremacy. And so he triggers Scales anyway to deal that extra 1 damage to me, but I'm kind of fine with that. It's no longer going to threaten me in the future. And now in this turn, I did end up going to lower life than him, which means that I can put on some major threat with Scar for a Scar into a Dawnblade swing. Now, I am now really dangerously low at this point, because at this phase, if he has a Razor Reflex, a Kadachi hit can kill me. So I have to start getting pretty worried. I do potentially have defense reactions, so if I have a Steelblade Shunt, I don't need to worry about that. But as we can see, I don't have one of those right now. So I'm pretty low. But I have a counter on my Dawnblade, and I'm swinging pretty big myself. My opponent is really... he's out of equipment except for his Tunic. So the Scar gets in for 1 damage here, and then the Dawnblade comes in for another 4. And these 4 damage Dawnblade swings are really annoying because if you block with 1 card, it doesn't stop it. So in this case, he blocks with a card and uses his Tunic. And that's going to be that. And so he does manage to knock the counter off of Dawnblade, but I knocked 2 cards out of his hand and did 1 damage and broke his Tunic. He only has 2 cards of his own with which to get me. I don't have a defense reaction here, so there is at least an argument that I should be blocking these Kadachi. Let's see what ends up happening. If I block a Kadachi for 3, it ends up putting me in a position where... if he plays Razor, then it gets in, but it only puts him up to 4. So then I take 1 damage and live. So I think I'm likely going to block both of these Kadachi for 3 to play around the Razor Reflex, which he might have in hand. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. So block for 3, block for 3. And then that's going to be his turn. He puts the other card in Arsenal, so maybe it was a Razor Reflex. Maybe it was a Plunder Run or something else that wasn't practical. Maybe it was a defensive card. I don't know for sure. I'm going to play a Ravenous Rabble here. It reveals my top card. My top card is a red, so this is coming in for 4 with Go Again. So these red Ravenous Rabbles are 5 minus the pitch of the top card of your deck. So in this case, they're coming in for 4 because I did reveal a red, and I think I have more than half my deck is red, so on average, the Ravenous Rebels do come in for 4 damage. Or the most common result is that they come in for 4 damage. The average is less than 4. The average is like 3 and a bit or something. I don't remember exactly what it is. And okay, so my opponent here is in an awkward spot. So I'm looking to see how many Razors he's played, and he's only played 1. So very likely he has 2 more. Razor Reflex Red is often a 3x card. So then my Ravenous Rebel comes in, and he actually double blocks. So he blocks 5 against it, which I'm happy about because then I'm going to come in with this Snatch for 4 draw and hit. So he has to either double block this or give me a card. He blocks it with just 1 thing, so 1 damage gets through, and that does give me a card. I actually forget to do the draw here, but he reminds me. And then I'm going to put that card in Arsenal after he reminds me, which is, that's gentlemanly of him. There's definitely people who would just sort of take that advantage. So yeah, Matt says, you get to draw 1. Do you want the card in Arsenal? And I say, all right, yes, thanks. And then I'm going to put that card, which was the first one that I drew from the leftmost side of the deck there, into Arsenal. And I now actually have a Steelblade Shunt in hand, which is really good for defense. And in fact, I have 2 Steelblade Shunts in hand, and that means this is a good game because he's coming in for 2. So he comes in, and he does have that Razor Reflex that I played around earlier, but I have the Shunt, so this is already really good because I stop the whole thing and deal 1 damage, but it's actually lethal because I have a second Steelblade Shunt, and I play that one, and that one gets in, and so that's a good game, and yeah. So the Steelblade Shunt is really a excellent card here, and in this game I knew that I had not played them yet. I have these blue Shunts, which are really good in these sorts of situations because when you pitch them early, they start coming up in the late game once players are low, and they can be really good both as a defense reaction in case the opponent has any tricks, and also for their damage, which can get in for the instant kill. So we kind of see both benefits of that in this game, where, I thought he might have that Razor Reflex, and I played around it. And he did, in fact, have it, and that was the card that he had put in Arsenal. But then the next turn, when he came in to try to get me with that Razor, I had successfully, essentially stalled him until I had the Steelblade Shunt, which I needed to save myself from death. And then, fortunately for me, I actually had the second Shunt that I needed to close out the game. But even if I had not had that second Shunt, I was going to be in a relatively good position for aggression. I did have a copy of Ravenous Rabble in hand. That could be 1 attack, and then for a second attack I could even use my even if I had to use 2 cards on the defense, I could have used my Tunic there to swing with my Dawnblade a second time, and then I had an Iron Song Response Red in Arsenal, which could have killed him if he did not overblock, unless he had a defense reaction. And at that point, I'm still doing a lot of threats. He's quite low, and I will eventually draw another Shunt to finish him off. Luckily for me, I got both of them on the same turn. So yeah, that's going to do it for this broadcast. Any questions or thoughts in the chat? I see Squirrelbane saying thanks for this, and Z the Bee types GG. Yeah, this was a fun game. So with this victory over Matt G, I moved on to the finals. And I am actually going to stream my commentary on the finals game, but that's not gonna be for today. I'm gonna do that another time. I might do it. I'm gonna try to get to that one by the end of the week. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have time to do it tomorrow because I'm gonna be playing in a online sealed event actually that's being hosted by some of the UK people. I don't know if there are still spots available, but if you're interested in that and you're hearing this, on the day that it was broadcast, talk to Big Medsy on the Discord, who is, I believe, one of the hosts for that event. I believe it's Big Medsy and Barum running that. And that's going to be hopefully a fun event. It's going to be my first time playing Sealed, so we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, so then I'm going to be showing you the final later. So the final is going to be me against Ruby, and that's going to be a Warrior versus Guardian matchup. And it's also, I think, is going to be quite interesting. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Flesh and Blood content. Yeah, there's also going to be some Star Wars Legion stuff coming up for the few Legion viewers who might be watching it this time. I haven't forgotten you guys. I did a Legion stream earlier today, and I should have some more stuff coming out with the ladder and all that. So thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll be back later with some more Flesh and Blood and Star Wars Legion content. Catch you later, guys.